everybody. I know we've still got folks joining, and we'll probably continue to have people do so for the next few minutes, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. Thank you for being here. For those who may not know me yet, my name is Jessica Howell-Edwards. I am the Executive Director for Wild Cumberland. We are a nonprofit focused specifically on Cumberland Island and its wilderness. I'm a volunteer. The team who put together tonight's presentation are all volunteers. So we've done our best to take what the Park Service has provided and maybe make it a little more understandable. We wanted to provide an opportunity for people to try to digest that a little bit better. There was about a 2-week period from the time they announced the proposed land exchange until their meeting. And so hopefully tonight's session will help you feel better equipped to attend the Park Services meeting next Thursday. And we'll be sure and provide a link to that meeting as well at the end of our presentation. So I've got some friends helping me tonight. So the machines are set up in a way that you should be able to see the presentation the entire time. If you experience any problems, we do have somebody monitoring chat. So please just drop a note there and let us know. We will do our very best to help. At the end of tonight's presentation, or at least my presentation, we will have plenty of opportunity for questions and discussion. And we will also link this material and the resources that we referenced tonight on our website and on YouTube following the session. So as soon as our volunteers have a little bit of free time, probably this weekend, you guys can look back and you can share this out in case anybody who was registered may not have been able to attend. So with that being said, I think we're probably going to go ahead and get started. Now, Kendrick is sharing the presentation, but I've lost that visibility. So let me see if I can go back. There we go. Okay, beautiful. All right, so Devin, if you'll go ahead and take us, we'll get started. So this session, obviously, you received an announcement when you came in, will be recorded simply so that we can reference it later. It might be helpful to refer back to over the next 30 days or so. And down there, I have for you sort of some expectations about how our discussion might go. We all come to this from different levels of understanding. And so I'm going to go over some sort of basic terms, but terms that we use frequently through this discussion so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page. We'll briefly go through all 4 exchanges individually. We'll look at maybe what's not there. We'll see it together presented a little differently. And then we will also talk a little bit more about how Cumberland Island compares to other parks. So with that being said, Dev, let's go ahead and move on. So the first term I have up here for you is a land exchange. You can certainly read the screen for yourself, but typically, a public land exchange involves trading public land for privately owned land, and it may or may not include a financial payment to sort of equalize the value for the trade. Wilderness, I think if you're here, most of you are familiar with this term. This is an officially designated and protected area. You can see there, this is a Park Service map from several years ago now, but that demonstrates both the wilderness area and the potential wilderness on Cumberland Island. So the green that you see featured there is our official designated wilderness area, and the yellow is potential wilderness. That category is protected land, and it's intended to become official wilderness, but it hasn't yet for assorted reasons. And so the agency, the National Park Service, is responsible for managing potential wilderness as if it were wilderness, and will eventually convert to wilderness. So just a couple more. Retained right. Some of you may or may not be familiar with that term through our podcast or other discussions, but in this circumstance, under those dynamics, the persons occupying the property have already received payment and transferred the title to the federal government. They retain the right to stay in it and occupy it under a specific agreement, and typically for a defined period of time. For most inholdings within the National Park Service's properties, that averages about 25 years. On Cumberland, in some cases, it was much longer. Fee simple property is that which is owned outright, just like many of you may own a home in your respective communities. And then on the right, you have the NEPA, which is, we use that term a lot, National Environmental Policy Act. This is a law that requires all of our federal agencies to consider environmental in particular, but social and economic effects of a project before they authorize it, fund it, or implement it. And then there's pre-NEPA. That's where we are right now. This is sort of an unofficial term, an unofficial scoping process that will precede the agency's official NEPA evaluation. Cumberland Island National Seashore, some of you may know this legislation by heart, but I have it there for your reference because I think it's an important place to begin our discussion and make sure that we stay centered. The Secretary of Interior is responsible certainly for acquiring and purchasing the lands, waters, and interests therein, and is supposed to be preserved in its most primitive state. So the stated purpose that the Park Service offered in their 9-page document proposing for land exchanges is, as you see, reflected here. So they say that by exchanging property with private landowners, the Park Service seeks to relocate private interests to other areas where it is more appropriate and less impactful on visitors. They go a little further, a little deeper, and they outline 4 sort of goals or objectives, I guess you would consider them therein. And you can read those. I'm sure many of you have read those, but establishing sort of continuity and connectivity within the park for efficiency, safeguarding critical habitat, facilitating additional designation of wilderness, and preventing or limiting private development on or near significant cultural and natural resources. I'm going to start with the first one, and we'll go through all of these, but I can tell you I offer maybe some better maps as we continue, so don't worry too much. We'll be looking at all of this in more detail as we go on. The first exchange, we had a hard time keeping numbers straight with the parcels and things that are moving about. So it's a 10-acre tract. Don't let that pink image in the center of your screen or in that map there. Yes, thank you, Devin. Fool you. That is a historic district. That is not a piece of the land included in this particular proposal. The 10-acre parcel at the top of your map there is owned currently by Nancy Kopp Wilderness Trust. It's a 10-acre parcel that is already designated as potential wilderness. And the Park Service is interested in potentially trading or acquiring that property and offering up the one you see at the bottom of the screen. And again, we'll look more closely at that, which includes infrastructure. So water access, a dock, septic utility lines, access roads, et cetera. That particular parcel is sort of between some of the next ones that we'll be seeing. So it is also bordered by federally designated wilderness. We'll be looking at that further as we go. Okay, number 2 is this one here. Now, again, don't look at the pink squares on your screen. We'll be looking at these again, but this is 2 parcels. You'll see them reflected at the top of the map there. Approximately 132 acres. And the parcel on the bottom that you see reflected, of course, they don't provide an acreage for that, but is similarly got a deep water dock, utility lines, access roads, and water access. So also, as you'll see, sort of bordered by potential wilderness there. Number 3 is listed here. So Grayfield Inn, for those of you who are familiar, is located within that pink parcel on the west side of the road, so closer to the marsh on that side. And the Park Service would like to acquire the property that is adjacent, so the darker shaded area within the purple, correct, about 136 acres there. And they would like to in turn offer Davisville, which currently holds National Park Service staff, I believe, and maybe some volunteers, as residence housing. It has 4 more buildings and is also bordered by potential wilderness. The fourth one, in case this one is a little bit easier to understand on the map, there is approximately 95 acres adjacent to Sea Camp, Ranger Station, and Campground. Many of you are familiar with this particular parcel. It does have ongoing litigation that was initiated by the Center for a Sustainable Coast tied to this parcel. They're suggesting to relocate, well, or exchange that parcel for the one you see at the top of your map. And High Point is the name of that location. It's an NPS-owned property that is adjacent to obviously both the wilderness and potential wilderness. It previously sold to the Park Service. The Trust for Public Lands purchased it in 1982 for $9.6 million. And the family has been able to occupy the property since that time under a retained right agreement. So at a high level, those are the parcels. Here's the pieces. I got a lot of questions about this before our town hall, which is, that some of those parcels, particularly the ones associated with the last exchange, number 4, do have other pieces of infrastructure, whether they are a dock or an airplane hangar. So those sorts of details, unfortunately, are not reflected in the plan that the Park Service has provided. So I think that's probably a good segue, actually, for us to go ahead and move to the next slide. And so we could talk a little bit about what we don't see that would be helpful for proper evaluation. And I've got a couple of these slides, but it's valuation, even estimates, is not included. There's not really any specificity related to the conservation easements that might apply to any of these changes. And while we can see how many acres might be coming into the park system or some iteration thereof, we do not see how many acres might be lost. So I don't know if that really allows us to perceive that correctly. But we also don't see any details specific to changes in either the fee simple ownership, as we talked about before, or the retained right agreements that might be attached to any of the parcels we've looked at. The potential wilderness also, as you noted, was not reflected in the map that the National Park Service provided. We're going to look at some other maps, but it would have also probably been helpful to see the cumulative changes or all of the things that have been proposed in one visual. So I'll try to do that for you. And then identifying other parcels and tracts, I think for context is really important because the things that they've proposed are not happening, in a vacuum. They have other effects around the island. So the last thing I'll point out, and we're certainly going to get into more detail, is that the proposed land exchanges did not make any mention for the public about any of these things. So the general management plan from 1984, a former reserved properties management plan, a land protection plan, and then the agency's foundation document. And I think that the details and context all of the preceding plans offer are necessary for us to be able to even begin to speculate about what the Park Service has proposed in this particular exchange. Now, Devin, I'm going to ask if you will pop over to that map. We have had a volunteer who had a little time this week, and we're going to try to show you some of these things. We'll also obviously try and make this available to you. But if you'll start up at the top with the potential wilderness, we will hopefully give you a little bit better context. So again, and I don't know, Dev, if you can zoom a little and if that helps what people can see. May not, I don't want to screw anything up, but what we did was use publicly available information to sort of see the tracks as they exist on Cumberland Island, and we overlaid the potential wilderness that is not reflected on the agency's map. This is imperfect, obviously. Some of the documents we got were imperfect. They don't match up to things correctly. But we wanted to try and illustrate some of this for you here. Deb, if you move to all areas too, this sort of shows everybody all the pieces that are in play in what the agency has proposed. So starting at the very top, adjacent to Little Cumberland Island is like a High Point estate, and then further down below the wilderness boundary, well, actually, kind of, there you go, up a little to the left. There's that one in the wilderness, the 10 acres, tiny little 10 acres. And then you get down to the wilderness boundary, you've got the yellow, which is associated with Stafford, the Stafford area. And then further down, you continue. So you can see that between the Lumar tract, which is the bottom purple parcel, there's a whole lot going on between there and the wilderness boundary, right? So Dev, if you can look at just the acquisitions, this is what under the agency's plan would become public land. So you can see those parcels clearly identified, and then under potential disposal, you can see the others. And we're using that term for real estate purposes. Obviously, acquisition and disposal sort of go hand in hand. But and then on each of those buttons, and Devin, you can move through them for people so they have a visual of what we were looking at in the larger map. But you can sort of better contextualize. The dark is what we would be acquiring, and the lighter parcel is what we would potentially be giving away in these exchanges. So you can show them what 2 sort of looks like, and 3. And then 4 doesn't look a whole lot different just because of how it's laid out there on the map. You can show them the historic districts just sort of for context, because those things tend to skew, I think, the way we're looking at these parcels a little bit. But I hope that some of that context maybe is helpful in evaluating what the Park Service has put forward. So that being said, we're gonna talk for just a couple more minutes about our observations and share a little bit about our position. And then I'd like to open up the floor to take any questions, thoughts, comments, feedback that this group may have. So I'm eager to hear from you. And Deb, if you'll pop up that Canva and let's see if we can. Thank goodness for these guys helping me out. This isn't new. This is something that's been in the media, that, potential development, potential division of properties, and sort of, this is, you can read all about it. But I think some of us are surprised that this has sort of been planned or this has been in planning for at least the last 5 years. This reflects the funding allocations for these exchanges. And, what I can tell you is that Cumberland Island consistently reflects one of the highest numbers of parcels and funding allocations for exchanges specifically in the last 5 years. Now, I am by no means a park budget expert, but I can tell you that this amount has been set aside annually in the years that you see there, and we'll provide reference to that for you a little bit later, but just to kind of contextualize that for everybody a little bit. As maybe you've heard from some of the things I've said, we don't really feel like there's sufficient information to really assess what the park has suggested. But at first glance, I think that it seems to facilitate certain management goals, but that may be very incongruent to the legislative intent of the seashore, which we frequently talk about was sort of intended to become an increasingly wilder, an increasingly more valuable ecological asset to park visitors, to the state of Georgia, to the national park system. So we can talk a little bit more about that history in a minute. Our position really is that there are no lands within the seashore boundary that should be available or appropriate for disposal. And we really believe that every parcel should have a plan in place to eventually convert it to federal ownership. So, the hill we will die on, right? You also know that we think a lot of this probably could have been preempted by the proper development and implementation of a wilderness management plan. The wilderness has existed for 42 years. And nowhere in that time have we managed to approve and implement a wilderness management plan to properly protect the boundaries and the character of such a special place. So I think these exchanges can be seen or have been presented maybe as a remedy of sorts, but I, again, just strongly feel that they are not in line with the seashore's intended purpose. So we can, I would like to hear from some of you, certainly, but Deb, if you'll move us forward, I'll catch my breath and drink some water, maybe. I feel like I have been talking for almost 20 minutes. And I fielded a lot of questions before tonight. That's sort of what helped determine what I included in this presentation. So I hope that even getting, certainly, again, I cannot speak for the Park Service. I urge you to participate in their public meeting next week, Thursday. But I wanted to be able to maybe offer a little bit more context. And with that being said, there are people who certainly have preceded my history, and I would be curious to hear what your perceptions of the plan are. If you have questions, or if there are things that we can help you potentially understand better from what the Park Service has presented. And Devin certainly can be available to help move us back and forth between maps, and move us around a bit. So Dev, maybe that being said, you wouldn't mind just going back to like one of the maps while we're talking, so we have sort of a visual setting or place while we begin. But Anna, I know thank you so much. You've been monitoring chat. Maybe I'll toss it over to you and see if there's anything specific in chat we should address first off. And then if you want to raise your hand, or certainly you can come off video, you can show me your face, but you can raise your hand, you can drop a message in chat, you can come off mute. I would really love to hear from you guys. Okay, I'm listening. Okay, let me take a look. If I'm supposed to hear audio, I don't. So let me go. Okay. So let me take a look at what's in the chat and see here. We heard from David. We need to know more about the specific legal requirements for National Park Service managing both wildlife areas and potential wildlife areas. This is especially critical in the absence of a wilderness management plan. Yes, absolutely. Wilderness areas. I think I followed you there. Anna's been dropping some links in chat, and again, we'll show those, and we'll continue to move through with some resources that might be helpful to you as we go along. Drake asked, what is the pre-existing level of development and infrastructure of the North Shore? So the only, you'll see there in the historical district that there are several small retained rights properties there. And then High Point, which is a little closer to the beach, is also a retained right property. So all of those are already owned by the National Park Service, and their occupancy will or is supposed to end. So there is not any fee simple, like outright ownership north of the wilderness boundary. This program, in fairness, or the proposal does center all of that development sort of, or additional fee simple, or we don't know, retained right or fee simple land in one area of the island. And for those who may be familiar with the sentiment that the island is supposed to become increasingly wilder and more remote as you go north, if you can imagine getting off at Sea Camp, while the parallel trail is an option, the road certainly goes right by where several of these properties are sort of butt up against each other. She said, Katie asked, oh wait, let's see, there's Anne. Let me put my glasses on, you guys. The land exchange with extensive talk of visitor impacts without reference to any assessed impacts to wilderness highlights the need yet again for them to create a wilderness management plan. Could you folks cycle through those maps that focus on the exchanges again a little more slowly? Yes, we can go back to the maps and revisit those for you. Absolutely. I think that will at least get us back to where we want to go, maybe, and then people can pop off. And if anybody has a question on audio, I just can't hear it, but I'm happy to answer it. So yeah, just raise your hand on the screen, and then I think my team can manage to work that out for me in some amazing technological fashion that I cannot. But yeah, Devin, will you take us? Let's see. Okay, let me move this chat out of the way here now. Okay, and then got some more questions. Let's see here. Savvy, do you want to go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll take a look at the maps again? Was there a question?
Yeah, I did. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thanks.
So this goes kind of hand in hand with the maps, actually, but I know the wording on there was that with the land exchange, it was acquisitions, but I'm just trying to clarify and wrap my head around something. And mostly just the idea of if it's really considered an acquisition, if the agency owns the
I think we lost you there, Savvy, but I think I know where you're going with that, because the word acquisition is a little, I don't even know if that was the right word to use here, because you're right. Many of the properties that are potentially identified in this plan could be retained right properties, in which case the federal government already has the title to them. So you're right, the word acquisition may be slightly misleading in that regard. I wasn't sure a better way to use it, but yeah, thanks for pointing that out, actually. Let's see. Now that we have been back in, what is the cash involved in the exchanges going to be used for? So the funding that you saw out, the funding allocations that we called out on a previous screen, and Dev, you could pull those back up and we'll go into maps a little more slowly. We'll go through all of them once. But if you pull up this slide that had the funding allocation on it in a second, that has been approved each congressional funding cycle for planning. I'm sure that involves some of the pre-NEPA work. So surveys or I know they've been doing a lot of archaeological work, but I think, 5 years of discussion and planning and a whole lot of potentially money has gone into something that the public has not really had an opportunity to weigh in on until now. So that's one reason I think it's important for us to make sure we do understand the implications of what the agency is proposing. Again, after this pre-NEPA process, which is a 30-day public comment period, the agency should then have to undergo a full NEPA evaluation, which takes environmental concerns into consideration in a different way. Okay. Okay, let me go back. I think there's some questions in here. I apologize. There's a lot, so bear with me. I'm getting a little old. Let's see if is it known which entities are receiving the properties and what plans they have for it? You're right. They have not identified individual tracts or parcels or ownership in this plan. And they do mention conservation easements could potentially be applied, but there's no detail or specificity tied to any of those things at this point. And then Devin, I know, let's see here. Okay. Questions that need to be sufficiently answered to support a responsible position being taken. What are the environmental, topographical, and hydrological features of the sites and their current designations, i.e. wilderness or critical habitat? What are the proposed or allowed uses? Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about there. The protocol for NPS's application of eminent domain in meeting its obligations under the legislation creating the National Seashore. My best understanding of this is that the agency takes a different approach to using the authority of eminent domain than it did during the time and development and acquisition of the seashore and, frankly, all of our public lands. So they do not typically choose to use eminent domain as a means of acquisition. They do retain the authority, but it is not perceived as a favorable, or I don't know, maybe it's just not congressionally in favor. I can't speak to why that is. But it was, of course, and I think that's important to say, a tool for the agency for a number of years. There are a number of landowners on Cumberland Island who were bullied or lowballed or threatened with the threat of condemnation and eminent domain who do not still have a seat at the table. And I think we would be remiss not to point that out. And I don't think we're the only people to realize that that's what's happening here. So, and then what is the source of these management objectives? I do not know why the agency prioritized these particular objectives, other than this has been obviously something that they have wanted to resolve for a number of years. Why it might have taken precedence over a wilderness management plan or anything else, I'm not sure. That's a question only the agency, I think, can answer. So I hope they can offer that next week. And how does the NPS evaluate effectiveness? That is a great question. And I hope the agency can offer some insight there. Let's see. Okay. Okay, let's see. I think my team, okay, there's so many in chat that it's getting a little harder for me to keep up. Is there anybody, maybe Anna could come off mute and read me the question that I need to answer because I'm getting old and
Sure, Jess, I'm happy to do that.
thanks, Anna.
Of course, Drake Lee Patterson mentioned a little bit earlier, what is the pre-existing level of development slash infrastructure of the North Shore?
Oh, okay. I think I answered that if I didn't do it directly. So the only privately owned land is south of the wilderness border. So on the very north end of the island, it's increasingly fewer pieces of infrastructure, and the only property remaining in that area for the most part is retained right. So those are intended to revert to federal ownership, and anything designated as potential wilderness would be designated as official wilderness once the non-conforming uses end. Is there another one, Anna? Oh, I've been trying to keep up. This is tough. Let's see. Devin, we didn't go through the maps again. Why don't we looked at one, but maybe we should look at like 2, 3, 4. And I don't know if people have a preference, yeah, of which one, but I think that the ones our volunteers put together might be helpful in a minute if we have more questions. So let's see. All right, so that's number 1. And you can maybe zoom in on your screen. Again, I'll make all this available to folks following our event tonight. And then 2, we'll look at number 2 again. So you can see if the main road goes sort of right up the middle there through the historic district. And then those 2 parcels, one is on the beach side, and then one sort of is on either side of the main road on the left. And then number 3, and then we'll go back into the map that we did, I think, is here. So the Park Service will be acquiring that dark shaded area to the right of the main road on the beach side. So, and instead giving away that parcel just north on the west side of the road. And then we'll look at 4. Lumar, again, down there, that's where Sea Camp is at the very south end of the map there, just adjacent to that particular parcel. And then all the way north, if you were to go almost 18 miles, all the way up there, right before you get to Little Cumberland, is where the High Point compound property is. So Deb, if you'll pull up to, I'm making you work hard tonight. If you'll go into the map that we did internally, because I think it kind of contextualizes how they're stacked on each other a little better, and maybe that'll help now that we've sort of cycled back through them again.
Also, Jess, they're going to keep me unmuted so I can read the questions to you. And I just want to make sure you were able to answer Ann Rush's question. Is it known which entities are receiving the properties and what plans they have for it?
Thank you. No, we do not know that. Now, on each of these funding requests, they were supported by other organizations within the state. So you can do that due diligence. We'll give you those links at the end of the presentation to see who helped to request the funding for those opportunities.
Great. And I believe that you may have answered this, but I do just want to double check from Jake Cooper. Would the transfer of properties from the NPS remain limited in ownership right or be fee simple for the transferees?
It is unknown.
Got it.
From what has been released.
Gotcha. We have another question in the chat from Mary. How can the NPS and Cumberland Island spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on land and the feral horses continue to suffer without any care, food, fresh water, veterinary care?
Yeah, I think that's a good demonstration of priority. I can't speak on behalf of the agency, but it's an excellent question and one I hope that the agency receives tomorrow night or next Thursday, next week.
Got it. I did put that in the chat for everyone as far as the public meeting details, plans, etc. If you guys want to scroll through and click that link. Another question from CJ. What do you all know about the land loss due to an evolving climate? Has the NPS planned for that?
I did not see. Now, certainly in their NEPA process, they could consider that as a factor in its sort of environmental analysis. but the seashore has not been very forthcoming about how they use that type of data. They are, I think, doing more of it. So I hope that maybe under new management, that's something that will become easier for the public to access and understand. It's certainly becoming more urgent.
Gotcha. And then let's see, Katie mentioned
Oh,
what.
somebody asked about the FOIA, and what I can tell you is that FOIA's Freedom of Information Act requests for the National Park Service are sent to a particular office, and then they kick them back to the park. And right now we have FOIAs we've been waiting on for 2 to 3 years. So a FOIA, I don't think, would turn around the information. In fact, much of the information in tonight's plan, we've been seeking information about for the last 5 years and have been unable to get that. So that's an issue for the agency nationally as well as locally.
I think the only other one I'm seeing, or just making sure we covered it, is there anything in the property the park is acquiring that appears to correspond to their plans from the latest visitor use management plan?
I think certainly some of these management goals might make that easier. Yes, I think that is a possibility, but they could only speak to that specifically. And I will note there are other, retained right land parcels that are not reflected in any of the maps that we've done. It might, and actually, Deb, now if you'll take us back to the presentation in a second when you're ready, we can click through because we've got a little bit more information probably that will be helpful to you. And certainly if there's anybody else on the call who'd like to share their perspective or their thoughts, I am eager to hear them. But yeah, let's flip through. So the agency, again, this is sort of what they're calling or categorizing as a pre-NEPA process. The official NEPA process is what the agency says will be the next step. So that's what they've outlined here. And then from us, you can expect tomorrow, I'll make some time available for everybody, but this is the public virtual meeting details. All of you have probably seen this from the park, and if not, we will make sure you have it. But you should be able to scan that QR code to attend their meeting. And at the website in there, the second blue link is where you can find the full 9-page plan that the Park Service put out and how to comment, where to comment. You can do it by mail and you can do it online. The deadline for that is October 6th. So I really encourage everybody to participate in the meeting next week with the Park Service. The agency gave some specific instruction and said that this is what they consider the most useful types of public comments for the pre-NEPA process. So alternative approaches and ideas, addressing both the purpose and the need, the range of environmental issues that need to be covered, potential to your point, other projects or actions that might affect or be affected by this particular proposal, likes and dislikes about it, and then information on how you use the seashore and how a land exchange might affect your use. So the agency very specifically is looking for public feedback on those 4 points, or that is what they say will be most helpful to them in their decision-making process. From us, again, I started to mention this, but I'll make myself available tomorrow, 2 hours for standing office hours. If anybody has questions, wants help, needs to understand something better, I'm here to help if I can. And I'm happy to drop that link, or Anna can drop that link to everybody following the meeting, or in chat. We will also put our public comments when they're finished available for everybody on our website. And the reason we recorded this, of course, is to ensure that we can put it up on our YouTube. So for folks that couldn't tune in tonight and maybe find value in this conversation, it will be available for your reference through the comment period and beyond. And then my email is there. I'm certainly not the only person available to help, but I tend to be most available. So if anybody needs specific questions answered, I'm happy to make any of these resources available. And then on that note, that's what we have here. All of these are live links. And so when you have these, you can click directly through to publicly available information, the tax map, the Park Service planning page. You can read a little bit about the history of land acquisition on Cumberland that might give you better context if you're new. And then other documents and things that may be relevant to the work and the project, including those budgets over there on the side. Those are really hard. You have to like really search, and they're not that insightful, but they are there. And I would encourage you to become as familiar with them as you're interested in being, because there's actually a lot of information there if you're looking for it. I think that's about all I got. Like I made it. We're not even at an hour, and I would like to hear if there's anybody else. I think. Okay, let's see. Got a question? I might not be able to hear. Okay. Helena, did you say something?
Am I there?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. It's taken me several minutes to get here. I'm
Thank you for being here.
I'm Helena Halsey. I'm a retained rights on the north end of the island of Cumberland Island National Seashore. I think you did a great job. Thank you. It was very good to gather more information. As a retained rights holder, having sold out in the fall of 1977, we didn't really know that or feel like, though I can't speak for everybody in my family, we had options. And this kind of comes as, wow, I never saw this coming. I really thought the park NPS was out to obtain Cumberland Island National Seashore and preserve it. So I really, really appreciate your information and your forum. This is hard. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thanks for being willing to share that with us. I know it's not easy. Everybody attached to Cumberland Island, those of you on this call, are intimately familiar with it to some degree and have an attachment to it. And we all care very much about it in our own way and have a different history and experience with it. And I think they're all equally important. So thanks for sharing that with us. And I hope you can attend the meeting and make your experience or share your experience with the Park Service directly. I think it's very important that they consider your perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Jess, I have 3 more questions that are in
Okay.
the chat at this time. So for Mary, would you say that the land exchange acreage is equal for both parties?
Doesn't look like that way if the maps are to scale, but again, the valuation in the acreage was not disclosed. And so it's very difficult to begin to project that. That is something that the agency should have shared for people to be able to sort of evaluate that. Again, you know, some of these sites that they're talking about may have been already turned over to the Park Service through a retained right agreement from someone else. They are sort of the cream of the crop. Like you can't go and put new infrastructure in on Cumberland Island. That's how we got here, right? Was the potential rezoning. So if you can't do that, the second best thing is the developed sites that are already there, I guess. And some of these plans say very explicitly what those sites, what was supposed to happen to those sites over time. And so that is why we find the proposal that the Park Service has put out to be just completely incongruent with the intent of the park and where it began in 1972 and where wilderness designation started or finally culminated in 1982. So it's very disheartening, and I share many of your sentiments, I think. What's my opinion on previous comment periods? I can see this one, Hannah, sorry.
No,
Is NPS typically responsive or helpful? So I can compare it with the visitor use management plan. We were expecting an answer on that over a year ago and have not received that. Oftentimes these pre-NEPA processes are used to move into an environmental assessment or a finding of no significant impact if they do not go through a full NEPA process. So I am hopeful that the agency will be listening to what the public thinks about this. And they do not have a responsibility to change anything necessarily, but they can modify the plan that they've proposed based on feedback that they receive from the public. So again, that's why I point you guys back to like the things they want to hear. The more specific and personal you can make your comments, and the more you can offer them, the more they have to work with. Now, of course, I think they should have been engaging with all of us the last, 5 or 10 years, but hopefully we will start to see that change. Can we see the map with all the parcels again? Dev, Johnny on the spot over here. Okay. It is helpful. NEPA is the only place for environmental concerns. Yes, this particular process is designed for NEPA to handle all of the environmental concerns associated with a project. All right, there it is, Dev. Okay, so all areas, and you may can scroll up just a smidge. I don't know if it's hard for people to see the or down, sorry, vice versa. There you go. Look, he's got it. This shows all of the parcels at play, so to speak. Now, all of those could be coming into the Park Service, but you can see the potential acquisitions. And again, I hear your point about whether or not acquisitions is the right term to use, and then potential disposal. I'm sorry, I don't have better terms for those. We did the best we could, I think, in the last week to try and make this more understandable or digestible for most of the public. But it's certainly a lot to wrap your head around. And, clearly the agency has spent a lot of money and a lot of time and are very invested in what they've presented. So, all right, there's number one. Deb will cycle through these for you again. And please throw up your hand or let us know if there's a spot you want to see again. We're so happy to do it. I'm really pleased that there are so many people who seem to care about the outcome of this particular project.
Jess, I did want to mention there are 2 comments in the chat that I think are very relevant. One is from Colleen, and it states, there is no indication that the 4 proposed exchanges are the only changes under consideration. And additionally, Thomas mentioned, bottom line, all land should go to the park and never be exchanged or lost, correct? So I did want to mention those 2 comments.
Thank you for your comments. You are correct that we do not know what else could be simultaneously being developed. We've talked a little bit about other projects that were not reflected in some of the outbound communications from the Park Service. So we know that the Grange is going through a renovation and restoration. We know that the Sea Camp Ranger Station is going to have a renovation or rehabilitation. There are a number of things even outside the visitor use management plan that are going on and are going to necessitate a great deal of activity on the island. So these are all excellent points. Let's see what we got. I don't want to leave anybody hanging.
I believe we're all caught up on any.
Oh, wait, no. Let's see. I've got one of my direct messages that say to summarize our comments and main points of concern for the public, like a grab bag of talking points. Yes. So I'm going to share out these slides again. And I think some of the things that are missing from the plan in particular are things you might want to pay attention to. But yes, we will certainly communicate out with the public a little more. So we've got a week until the National Park Service meeting. And then we've got a week or 2 weeks after that before the comment period ends or closes. So hopefully this gives us a good foundation. And I appreciate that you're interested in that. So we will be communicating back out. And if anybody out there wants to help, we welcome you to contribute to what we're doing. So these are all great. And any questions, just so everybody knows too, if we miss anything in chat, we're capturing it and I will follow back up or make sure that we communicate out answers if we have them or can point you in the right direction. We're so glad to do it. And I realize this is not necessarily an exciting topic and maybe not always seen as something positive, but I really appreciate that you're willing to engage and learn enough to be prepared to comment appropriately. So yeah, and depending on how much you think you know about the island and participating tonight, and if as many of you show up tonight as you, or next week as you do for tonight, then our fundraiser will be successful. Every Wednesday night this month for National Wilderness Month, we are playing trivia, and every week I learn something new, and every week I laugh. It's only $10. You make a donation at wildcumberland.org, and then you can see us all again on Wednesday, and we can socialize maybe in a different way. So please check that out on our website if you haven't already, or on our socials. You surely will find it at wildcumberland.org. And I'm here. Thanks for putting that back up. Again, I will make sure to share this out with everybody, in our website will be updated. It hasn't been thus far. We've been in socials, we've been in emails, we've been in this space, but we will hopefully get everything synced up for you soon. So Anna, I'm here. If anything else pops up, I'll stay on for a few minutes. And please feel free to call anything out if I missed it. But I hope this has been helpful, and I really appreciate you all. Thanks.
Jess, the only other question that came in, and just for the purposes of the recording, I did want to make sure you're able to answer. It's from Mary. Can you tell us who exactly are the property owners behind this land exchange, in parentheses, who is dealing with the NPS?
Okay, so we have not received that detail, but based on the parcels identified on the map, the publicly available information, you see those. And Dev, can I make you pull up some more slides one more time just for fun? You will see the names that we have sort of begun to associate with the parcels, because again, numbers are hard and letters are better over here for Jessica anyway. But you can see that. So when Dev pulls that, thank you, Devin. We've called this one sort of McFadden, Cobb McFadden, because of the wilderness property there. And number 2, if you'll go through one more, Stafford is right there, firmly, usually associated with the Foster family. And again, some of the properties in exchange are sort of like butted up to each other. So you see Old House Road reflected in more than one of these. That's because they're kind of in the same vicinity. Again, some of these other documents and plans might show you more detail on what is in the property and what it looks like and what kind of condition it's in. At least, maybe a decade or 2 ago. So you can see that. And then number 3, let's see, that's Grayfield. Davisville is again that area where National Park Service staff is currently housed. Ferguson. And then number 4, we have Lumar, which we know to be associated, and High Point to both be associated with the Candler family, some division before. Of course, that was all before my time. I'm just trying to keep up. All right. Thank y'all. We did it in an hour, but I'm here. Let me know if you need something. Thanks, y'all.